everybody, welcome back to the Overwater interview series. Today's guest is Phil Mulford. Phil is a bit of a legend on the London scene. He's played with artists such as Annie Lennox, Lionel Richie, Beyoncé, Kylie Minogue, Lionel Lewis, the list goes on and on. In the interview, we're going to be talking about Phil's Overwater basses and why he chooses to play them. We're going to be getting into live playing in the West End. We're going to be talking about Phil's advice that he would give his younger self. And he's going to update us on his current projects. One of these is actually a tribute to Louis Johnson called Thunder Thumbs, and Phil is going to take us through some of his favourite Louis Johnson bass lines. So if you like slap bass and you want to get a real insight into that style, this is a great one for you. I hope you're really going to enjoy this one. Phil has had one of those careers that is very hard to find these days, and he really is an inspiring guy to sit down with. He'd actually practiced an hour double bass in the morning. I think he was going to go and practice an hour fretless in the afternoon. He's incredibly hardworking and humble, and he's got some great advice for us all in here. Enjoy, and we'll see you soon. Let's just jump straight into it, mate. I've heard some stories from Chris over the years, but how did you meet Chris in the first place, and where did that journey with Overwater begin for you?
Probably late 80s, I guess. So I was a pro 40 years ago, and go to the usual sort of music fairs. You saw the stand and saw the basses, and I was like, wow, I like one of these. And I was playing with Barbara Thompson, playing a lot of fusion, and wanted a bit more range, and certainly wanted a fretless that really worked. So probably about 87, I guess I'd go and see Paul Carmichael playing with his band called Flight, and he had an Overwater. I didn't really see Mo Foster playing around, but I'd see him on the stand with Chris and with Paul Carmichael. And then end of 89, I commissioned Chris to build me a pair of basses. So there was a fretless and fretted 36-inch scale 6-string. So they arrived, one just before New Year and one just after 1990, I think it was, because I was in the flat in Sutton with my then girlfriend, now wife. So, and the first bass arrived, and I opened the case, and I was like, wow. And then that was the start of my journey. So I did years of work with them as my main instrument, just went straight into it, sort of slowly got rid of things that I had, and then sort of 96, 7, I started talking to Chris about doing a sort of jazz bassy type thing, along with Marcus Cliff, who you might know, the Manfreds, who does the Manfreds and played, on some really great records. Tanita Tikaram on those, Sleeping Satellite, the big hit, and all of that. And then Chris produced one, and then we were doing a consultancy with Carlsberg for the Delta amps, and it came to the end of it, and Chris said, well, I'll sort you out with the money for the consultancy work, or I'll make you a bass. So he made me this.
This is the one. This is the original.
This is the original one.
Jazz, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's ash body, maple neck. It's a bit narrower than I would have liked, possibly now. But I think it's 17 or 17 and a half. But it doesn't bother me, and it does come out quite often, actually. I did some Beverly Knight gigs for Dave Troke, Depping for Dave.
I saw that, yeah.
It came out on a few of those.
Yeah.
And I think the first thing I recorded on it, there was a girl called Daisy Hicks. It was an old friend of mine, Tony Hicks, who played with Backdoor. Colin Hodgkinson played the bass, that amazing guy playing all the chords and stuff. That was probably the first recording I did with it, and it sounded amazing, although I had a bit of an earth problem because there's no plate on this.
Yeah.
So John sent me 3 washers soldered together so that the pots would earth, because the plate does the earthing thing on the Fender, quite a lot of it. So anyway, I had to sort that out. Maybe on the session, I can't remember what happened on the session, but yeah, it was a brilliant session. Really enjoyed it, and the bass sounded absolutely great. Bit of a happy accident with all these electronics, because I'd known John for years. I think the first time he made me a circuit was about 83, or something. I had a Stingray, and somebody stole it out of my car. It was heavy though,
Bastards.
and had a really bad dead spot. John made me a little Music Man circuit, and I dropped it into a Roger Giffin bass I had, and I wired two Bartolini single coils together into one, so they humbucked, and it sounded really like a Stingray. So I had that, and John made me that, and then the back end of the 90s, about 98, he was starting to put the J Retro together, so that's what's in here. If anybody wants to hear this bass, there's a little track I did last year. I started recording the track about 20 years ago. And in fact, the drums are probably from about 18 years ago, recorded in the shed in the garden. Tim Goodyear did those, who's a really old friend, great drummer. And I slowly put this track together. And then last year I was like, I'll put it out. But it's got a whole intro with this bass and a Rhodes. It's called For Dukey, Maurice and Marcus. So it's Maurice White, Marcus Miller and George Dukes. Yeah. So if you hear it, you'll hear all these sort of elements. The intro is obviously my Marcus Miller bit, a very poor imitation. But you can really hear the tone of the instrument. I've had loads of great comments from people. And I sort of mixed it all off and sent it out, got it, mastered it up, sent it off to Jazz FM. And I said to my wife, I said, that's the last I'll ever hear of that. There's a local DJ who was quite a face in the sort of 80s and 90s called Jeff Young, who lives locally. I don't know him, he's a lovely guy. He's retired now. He was at Jazz FM about 4 or 5 years ago, but he still keeps an eye on the logs. And he sent me an email, said, you're on the playlist this week. I was like, what? So I think I've had 60 something plays of the track, which was quite unexpected, particularly that it's got a minute of bass guitar with a Rhodes on its own at the beginning. But it's funny because there's percussion that comes in, but they seem to talk over the first bit, which is quite amusing. It's like my little moment. But yeah, that was a bit of a surprise. Anyway, but that's, if anybody wants to hear what this, what an Overwater bass sounds like, you can just dial into that.
And then I'll put a link up when this goes on YouTube. I'll add a link to that because I've seen that video and it does sound fabulous on there. So I'll put a link in the YouTube video so you can click somewhere around here and it will take you to that Phil playing that one.
Great. And then I've got my other pair, which are
let's see the whole lot.
Well, there's this one, which is that's the one that I generally use for everything, and this
is the one I associate you with the most. I think I always see you with that one.
Yeah, that's the Swamp Ash Rosewood, and I get a lot of people say to me, "Oh, is the Rosewood bright enough?" Yeah, sure is. It's a great instrument. It's so even, and I'm sorry about this, Chris. Though,
what have you done to it?
Well, I didn't do anything. I've got one of those Precision 57 reissues, and the pop fell off into the bottom of the bag. So after a few weeks of putting this in and out the bag, I realised that it was in this area and it decimated the paint. But, it's a grand thing. And it's I get so many great comments about the sound. And then, as I did with the 6 strings, I did this.
A matching pair.
I think the body's from the same piece of wood. So Chris made me this one,
right,
which is exactly the same. Matching. I always have a matching headstock with these, and I would like a maple neck one actually, a maple fingerboard, but that's got a J tone in it, and they're the same again. They're the Bartolinis.
This is a combination that I think really comes back to you. Obviously, the East preamp Overwater bass with the Bartolinis. It's so popular with pro players that we may have finished by now, but the things that's been going on this year is we're modelling the Bartolini jazz pickups. So we're going to have an Overwater version of that coming out. So the guy that wires our pickups currently has been taking Bartolinis apart, studying them, and is going to rebuild an Overwater version so that we can offer that with everything being in-house. So it's something that we're really excited about launching very soon.
Yeah, there's something magical about them. And, with the instrument, with that and that little combination, I mean, I've had some very sort of interesting things. But one time, I think I was sound checking for a show. What was it? It was Kinky Boots. And it was the guys that were who do Lion King were doing it, and they'd come in and we were just before a tea break, I remember, and the guy said, "Yeah, bass." So I literally played like 30 seconds, and then somebody went, "It's tea break," and off we went. We came back, and then they were doing the cello, and I was like, "They're not going to bother with me then." And then I saw the guy in the pub later. He said, "I put the bass up." He said it sounded so great straight away. He said, "I knew I'd have no problems with that." So, and that was it. Also, the sustain. I mean, the sustain on this is outrageous. There's one note in one of the shows that was like through 3 bars. And with this, it's still going.
Yeah.
When most basses, it's just like...
Yeah, not even tailing off, just keeping going.
Yeah. It was just like, yeah, amazing. But,
Yeah.
you know, so, you know, the quality and... You know, the wood. I've been up in Chris's wood store the last time I was up there.
Oh.
You know, some good stuff there. And, you know, it's
Up
all
in
the
the
raw
loft.
material. But also, yeah, the loft.
Yeah.
You know, it must be such an investment. Also so hard to find,
Yeah.
you know, really good stuff. Now, people say, oh, the old wood. I'm sure wood ages and also instruments. I mean, I've got several theories about instruments, but one of them is actually that because I've had loads of friends, they bought expensive boutique instruments and all of that, and then you see them and it's like, where's that instrument gone? Yeah, well, I couldn't get on with it, or you know, it's like 4 months, and these basses here, because I had this anyway, it took me about a year to get in the groove with them.
Yeah.
And then you're really in the groove. But I think you have to persevere with you becoming sort of sympathetic, you know. I mean, I pity, well, not pity, but it must be hard being like a concert pianist. You turn up at a concert hall and it's a heavy old piano.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, next day you get one, it's a joy to play. The next day it's a bit dead. The next day the hall's not right, you know, it must be a very difficult thing. But with obviously, you know, having, you know, a great instrument that is, you know, I think they sort of, for yourself, they sort of accrue value because you invest in them. I think there's a lot of things as well where you take things into account with the instrument you don't even realise. A friend of mine said to me that the G on the fretted one of those, the newer J series, he said, "Oh, the G's really, really loud." And then I played his bass. It had the deadest G string. It was like, you really had to. And I was like, well, you're used to. So I think one of those things about compensating, you do that much more than you actually, you know, realise it in a sort of good way. And it brings the instrument to you, you know, brings it to life kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to sound different in your hands to anyone else's. And yeah, absolutely. You get to know it over the years. I definitely find that with mine, where and now since I started working with Overwater, I'm lucky enough to play a lot of different basses. And they're all fantastic. I've been taking them out with Gabrielle a lot over the last year, trying out different things. But it always feels like home coming back to my blue jazz bass. It's just the one for me. I'm so used to it after having played it for 20 years. It instantly feels familiar and comfortable.
Yeah. You got a 35 scale? Have you?
Yeah, mine is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all three of these are 35 scale. I do find it. What I actually find is because people say, "Oh, this has got an amazing B string." You play it, and there's this huge noise, but actually, it's not got so much fundamental pitch. Whereas I think the longer the scale you get, the more balanced it is with the other strings, and also you end up with this really good note with the pitch rather than lots of sort of waffle around it.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot more clarity to it. I do think the 34.5, which is kind of in favour now. I know
Right.
I was talking to Ian King not that long ago, and he has one that's 34.5, and that works really well. I think that's kind of a happy compromise, particularly for people potentially with kind of smaller hands who don't want to go out to the full 35. But
yeah. I mean, my hands aren't. I've got pretty small hands actually, but you know, I think it's all what you do with him, your stretch, and
Yeah.
how hard. I mean, also it's how hard you play. I absolutely whack it. I was with
Good man.
I was with who was it? Gary Granger, the John Schofield
Yeah.
bass player. I used to do a bit of work, a few depths with Acoustic Alchemy, the smooth jazz lot. Great, loved playing with them.
Yeah.
And Julian Crampton wasn't around, so somehow I ended up doing some depths, quite a few actually, and then went to see them, see Greg and Miles, and yeah, I tried Gary's. He's got a signature Paul Reed Smith, a lovely thing, and it was really low. And I started playing it, and he's like, "Heavy playing, man." You know, I was like, "Well, yeah, you know." But everybody's got their thing. He's got beautiful, I mean, amazing player, beautiful light touch.
Yeah.
But, you know, everybody's got their thing. With me, it's like, you know, sort of nervous energy, sort of
digging
bang. Whereas, you know, some people are, you know, a lot more refined, and you know, I do sort of run out of gas a bit sometimes when I'm playing fast ideas, or you can, you know, get a bit more buzz. But yeah, you know, it's like drummers. You watch some drummers and they play so hard, and then people like Jeff Porcaro evidently was quite gentle. Harvey Mason, you'd never know it from the recordings.
And that's another thing that you just learn, particularly as you grow with an instrument. You learn when it's going to sound good digging in, and when you need to just pull back a little bit if it needs to be really clean, no buzz or anything like that. Because I think I probably have similar tendencies. If I pick up a bass that's set up, you know, perfectly low and incredibly quick, I'm playing it a bit harder than it probably wants to be played sometimes. Whereas I tend to have my basses just a fraction higher, so I can dig in a little bit more, and I'm not getting it. It's not choking it the whole time.
I mean, mine's a sort of medium action, but you know, it's not super high. There's some people that, you know, with massive great hands and real, you know, I mean, they are strong hands, but you know, it's a good thing. I mean, I'm excited to hear there's some new strings on the way.
Good. Very, very good, Phil. You're really on script here. Yeah, we're literally released this weekend. I just had an email from Chris this morning. They're flying out by the sounds of things. It's gone really well so far. When I first got my bass, for years and years and years, I always got my strings from Overwater. So I'm excited to have that back. And
I've got 3 old packets in my garage.
Have you still got them?
I've got maybe 4.
Right.
Yeah, there's some 6-string packets and stuff, but I really like those strings. I put a set on the last set of 4-string on I've got a Squire Jazz, one of those 80s Squire. It sounds absolutely fantastic, you know. They're good strings, those, and you know, I'm glad to hear that, you know, Chris has figured something out, because it's, you know, nice, and also the gauges are good. I like those just a bit lighter than, you know.
They're sort of 44 instead of 45, I think, aren't they? And
I know it's a silly amount of, you know, 1,000th of a.
So on that, if you have played an Overwater bass or you've bought one recently, they are the same strings that the Overwaters ship with anyway. So they are the strings that we feel match the instruments really well. And what we've been able to do is just work out production so we can start selling them as sets. Before, we were only just getting enough strings that we could put them on the basses that we're building, and that was that. So so they're the strings we choose for the instruments anyway when you buy one. And I think you'll find them quite reasonably priced.
There's a lot of facets with strings, isn't there?
Yeah.
You know, I like a bit of flexibility sideways, because I do quite a bit of sort of, you know, that sort of. And if they're a really thick core, then you end up with, you know, they're not as flexible as I'd like them. So, you know, I think probably one of the only ones is, I think, DR Sunbeams or something. They're okay. Yeah. But I do like them where they've got a bit of give. But also, when you've got the longer scale, you can have a lighter string, because you've got more tension in the longer scale.
Yeah, sure. You don't need a great thick string because the tension is in the instrument itself anyway.
Yes,
That makes sense.
and I really enjoyed using those strings, so I look forward to
Yeah,
getting some of
yeah.
having a go on those.
We'll get you some in the post so you can check them out. I
Yes, hey, well, I mean, kind of good opportunity. Over the past probably about 25 years. In fact, we did. Well, it's longer than that, isn't it? 96, I think. We did the Frankfurt Messe with Carlsberg doing that Delta amp thing that we did, and there was certainly one tune, possibly two, that because I was in the booth and I played along with some backing tracks, and one of those tunes is now fully nourished and has my 6-string fretless on it. But there's a whole bunch of tracks, mainly with Overwater basses, which I've just I'm at the final stages of mixing and mastering. It's quite exciting because I've done lots of albums with my own groups, the Mulford McFarlane group, System X. Then I did the Boaters project with Jackie Hicks and Frosty Beadle, and put all these things together. And then this one is all my own stuff. Is it all original? Yeah, it's all original music, and it's there's quite a lot of 6-string stuff on there, and this bass is on a couple of tracks, 2 or 3 tracks. There's quite a few things with 6-string on. So that'll be literally out very soon.
That's the one for. Oh, I'm going to get it wrong. Dukey, Marcus, and Maurice, or is that the wrong way around?
That's on there, yeah.
But that's the first release off
from
that record.
Project. Brilliant.
Okay.
Well, so but it'd be a good, again, it's a good sort of showcase of particularly because the 6-strings do have a unique. The Progress type 6-string does have a kind of unique.
Very much. So you still have those 2 matching 6-strings?
No, I don't. No, I wasn't using them at all, and it was one of those things where I sort of came to the conclusion that it would be much better if they were out there making some music. They're no good sitting in my loft, and how it kind of evolved was sort of end of the 90s. I started getting quite a lot of calls to do sort of generic, a lot of session work, lots of TV work, albums, bits and bobs, and they really have a personality. And the bass needed to be sort of inverted commas, a bit more sort of at the bottom, sort of anonymous, sort of, what's the right word? The sort of accepted sort of bass sound, really. They, as I say, they had a lot of character, and which was brilliant, and when you hear some of the tracks, they really speak, and there's some great, really nice things about the sound. But I needed something that kind of fit in. I remember talking to Dave Richmond about this. Dave did millions of sessions in the sort of late 60s, 70s. He was like the TV first call. I remember saying, I said, I had a really good week. I had 7 sessions this week. And he said, if I had 7, he said, I'd have thought the business had finished. They were like 21 sessions a week. So he said, it'd be in a jingle, then it'd be an album, then there'd be a TV show in the afternoon, evening. And then he'd never be doing any sort of, or not a lot of concert work. He did play for, I think he played for Cliff for a while. He played with Manfred Mann very early on. But he got his Burns Bison bass.
Oh, wow.
Is where I'm going with this story. He's got a lovely story with it. He said he went down Denmark Street. He was in the Manfred, Mike Hug, Mike Diabo band, or whatever it was, very early 60s. And he was playing upright, I think. And it was like, you need to get an electric. So he goes down Denmark Street with his wife, and she points on the wall, and it's a Burns Black Bison. So he buys it, and he's still got it. He went right way through with it. But he said at one point he had to buy a Fender just for the, for the thing, for the kind of, that generic sound. So that's where kind of this came from, really. I wanted an instrument. I wanted Chris to make it. So, we sort of settled on this. And then he evolved it. I mean, this has got the old style headstock, or I don't know whether it's a first generation headstock. It's a bit different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think Marcus Cliff has one of the really first of the next generation with the new style headstock like that. So, and then about 2004, I got this pair. So they're 20 years old. And, it's one of those things where, I had this and I was working it quite hard. So I just wanted to move into a sort of another, area. I definitely wanted a fretless, and I thought having a rosewood fingerboard would be good. So yeah, it kind of worked out really well. And if I'm going out to do something, and they always go out with me, and it's like absolutely the go-to instrument. Sometimes I get asked for specific things. I did the disco prom a few weeks ago, and Callum was really keen that it was that thing. So he wanted a 4-string sound. So I had a jazz and a precision and a Music Man, although there was actually quite a bit of tuning down. So just for an open D, I think I had to drop a key for a couple of things. Right. So that was fun because, if you're not used to that, I've been doing that for years, but that was quite fun. And also getting it perfectly in tune, because those things can slip and all that. And that's where, the 5-string really comes into its own.
Why was it tuned down as opposed to just kind of play it down? You weren't going below the low B.
Oh no! I didn't mean on this. I mean on it was a 4-string where they wanted me to use, I used a precision and a jazz, but I tuned down using a 4-string. So I would have a open, I guess you call it open D tuning. So that thing, which is fun for sight reading. Suddenly your shape changes, doesn't it?
Yeah, that would give me a headache trying to sight read. With different tuning, but good for you. Callum, a monster arranger. I've done a couple of gigs with him over the years, and ridiculous.
Yeah, tremendous charts. I mean, really super accurate, and really nicely laid out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting what you were saying there, because I was thinking about this before we jumped on today. I think you're one of the guys that kind of bridges that gap of. I think everyone's quite familiar with, the kind of. I mean, I think there's even a Facebook group, isn't there? Like the golden days of the LA session men and these quite famous times in music. I think you very much represent that in London. How do you see the state of that side of the music business today? I mean, obviously the studios they're not as many studios as there once were. But is it still a thriving area, or can you talk a little bit about where you work in that in that field?
Well, I'm just after. I'm like the first generation after drum machines and sequencers came in, really,
right,
and started. Yeah, because I remember going in and there was a BBC B computer in a session.
So with its own booth.
Yeah, with the little screen and them doing a load of synth-based stuff on it or whatever, or programming.
Right.
So I'm sort of the first generation after, rather than there's a few guys a bit the next generation back. Steve Pearce is 5 years older than me, so he's more in it, and Andy Pask as well, who's an Overwater guy. Yeah, we're all kind of. We're the sort of generation where the crossover sort of happened into a lot more electronic stuff. Yeah. But I didn't do any sessions when I was, I do some, but I started doing quite a lot of session work when I was 39. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So until then, I was doing, dozens, but not many.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, sort of early 2000s, I guess, things really sort of took off, and I started working for quite a few music producers and stuff. We were
Right.
doing a lot of telly and a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what happened to me. So early on, I was, as I say, doing stuff with bands and bits and bobs. But
Yeah. I've seen you out with your own project Thunder Thumbs quite a lot. Is there much coming up with that? And can you tell us a little bit about what that is to people that don't
well,
know?
it's a Lewis Johnson tribute. So as we all did, we all had records and played along with them. Not
Absolutely.
quite as well as we'd like when we were younger, and then obviously as things went along, we got it together. So
Yeah.
yes, I made some very, very bad efforts at some of the tunes, and then I had an eye operation actually, and I couldn't move for 3 weeks. So while I was in bed with this gas balloon inside my eye doing its magic and welding my retina back on, I got the laptop out, and with my good eye, I started doing the charts. So I probably did about 10 charts or so. It's something I always promised myself I'd do.
Right.
When I heard of his passing, I think it was 2015. Those albums, Blam, Light Up the Night, Winners, well, all of them, in fact, and all the stuff he's on with Michael Jackson, Quincy Jones, The Dude, and all of that stuff. It was music that I thought, if I don't make a band, I'll never play it. I mean, you do get to play the occasional one on a gig. So, yeah, I put the band together, and I thought, what's the minimum amount of people can we do this with? And how can I make sure that none of us make any money? So we ended up with a 10-piece. Yeah, I mean, it could do with percussion, another trumpet,
Yeah.
2 keys, 2 guitars. But, the 10 is good, 4 rhythm, and 3 singers. And I chose 3 singers as well as 3 horns, because obviously you can get a proper chord out of 3 when, if you've got 2 horns, that doesn't work. And the same with the singers. I've got the 2 girls. A lot of those things have got Patty Austin doing backing for George Benson, or doing backing on the Dude for the tracks, or on the Michael Jackson. And there's probably like 12 of her recorded or something. So to have the 2 girls together. So the whole concept was that, and I put it all together, and we had a first rather haphazard gig, no rehearsal. And in fact, we've never done a rehearsal. We just do sound checks. It's impossible. It's impossible to get 10 people together.
Yeah.
But people are great. Jeff Dunn such a privilege to play with somebody like Jeff Dunn, and that's like the crux of it, is the bass and drums.
Yeah.
For me, it's and Jeff just kicks it off. It's so great. And Simon Healy plays keyboards. He came along, sort of depped onto the second gig, and I hadn't really sort of formulated that particular side of it. Who were going to be the absolute regulars. I knew it was going to be Jeff, and Simon came along with all these sounds and a lot of hard work, and just made it his own. So that was great. And then the singers have evolved a little bit. Simon Foster's now the singer, but yeah, it's a lot of fun, a lot of organisation. But the brass players, if you write them a load of rubbish to read, they'll read a load of rubbish. They're amazing. They come along. We've had quite a lot of depth in the brass, more than anything else.
Yeah.
And those guys, the standard of their reading and anything is just stone cold. They just kill it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so grateful to everybody that's come along, and they just enter into the spirit for not very much money, But everybody comes along, and just like at the end of the gig, they're like, "Oh yeah, I just remembered why I took this instrument up in the first place,"
Yeah.
And also the writing, those Jerry Hay horn charts and the rhythm arrangements and everything is like, it's the best. I think that era is like the best music ever.
Yeah,
I might be
absolutely.
slightly biased.
No, I think we at some point we've all kind of come up listening to those tunes. So when you get to play like that kind of music. And I remember, like, a lot of the time for me, we did an early band after university, which was some Brothers Johnson stuff, some Quincy stuff, some Tower of Power, and it was kind of the same thing. Like, it was such a joy to play. You stop caring about, how much the gig's paying and everything, just because it's kind of the dream set list when you're doing stuff like that a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I'm still adding tunes. It's about 35, I guess. Okay.
So that's a good link. So on that note, can we, as soon as you've got a bass in your hands, and I know it's the wrong bass, but this is an Overwater podcast after all, top 3 Lewis Johnson bass lines.
Oh, blimey.
So I should have messaged you about this about an hour before we started.
I guess it's too many. I mean, one of my favourite things, which we have done on a few gigs, there's about a 9-minute bass solo on YouTube. And Jeff and I, we've never rehearsed it, actually. And that's absolutely honest. If you go on, you'll find it. It's there's a couple of versions of it, actually, but this particular one is a drummer called Richard Diamond, and they do this to and fro thing. Mm-hmm. And some of the things he plays on it are just quite incredible. And some of those things were some of the hardest things kind of to play, to work out what he's doing. Because he plays with his... I can't really emulate him properly because he plays with his thumb over the top.
Yeah.
If you notice, if you go to the George Duke Japan thing, he's doing octaves,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he comes over with his left hand, doesn't he?
Yeah. So that's fun. I mean, one of my favourites is... That's Mr. Cool.
Yeah.
And I think he plays every one with his thumb. So, it's incredible. But he's so physical as well. He's like out here.
Yeah, you can see why they called him Thunder Thumbs when you see him. It really is hammering away, isn't he?
Yeah, it's like... all that. I don't think he plays a lot of stuff. I don't think he plucks the D string from what I can gather. And there's certain ways that I learned to play things, and then I realised they were wrong.
Okay.
But, what's it? In fact, he gets a writing credit on that, on Get On The Floor.
Well, if he came up with that bass line, he should do, because it's the main bit of the tune, isn't it?
And that...
Yeah.
I actually... I did that originally, which is where you do a pull-off.
Yeah.
And actually it sounds more...
Yeah.
Or as opposed to...
But it's just dead notes, yeah.
Something like that.
Okay.
So there's that. That's another... I mean, that's such an incredible bass line.
Yeah.
Street Wave is a good one. Oh, God. Can't remember it now. Yeah, some of them are quite unnatural. Because I'm also a Mark King. I sort of crossed over into Mark King a bit as well, and I sometimes end up doing too much of the fretting hand thing.
The two-handed
Lewis
thing,
is much more. Lewis is much more thumb.
Yeah.
And a lot of his thing as well. A lot of the tunes are like. So there's a lot of that sort of sliding up and stuff, which is intrinsic to a lot of the tunes. I'm trying to think of some of the.
So just to break that down, that sort of difference between Lewis Johnson and Mark King. Mark King's approach is kind of two-handed, isn't it? If you're thinking about 16th, it's kind of right left, like a drummer, really, almost with like paradiddles and those kinds of things. Whereas Lewis Johnson is all kind of driving it with the thumb. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, it's very much a thumb thing. Oh God, what's the thing called? Overture. George Duke, because he played on a load of George's things. He also played, because once I found out he was with George, I thought he must have played on some Jeffrey Osborne, because I knew there was some Jeffrey Osborne albums, and I found those, and they're some of the best tunes we do. Ain't Nothing Missing is absolute belter. And I say to the audience, you won't know this tune, but you'll love it when you hit at the end, and they're sort of hushing the audience. Oh God, we're going to listen to a tune we never heard. By the end of it, they're like, my goodness. But the quality of the George Duke productions. I think that one's the line for Overture is like. So that's that's a thing, and it's all thumb. It's just, and there's a little sneaky pull off. I don't know whether he plays that. I'd love to see some of the things. There's not. Nowadays you'd have the person would be alive. You could watch them do it. There is that Starlix video thing where he absolutely smashes the Stingray to bits. I'm sure the poor bass is like screaming for mercy, but it's absolutely, he's an absolute tour de force in it. And I wish I had even, a bit more of his stuff. A very nice thing though, his widow has been in touch on the internet.
All right.
And I saw a message come up. I think her name's Lauren Jane Johnson, and it came up, and I thought, oh, here we go. I'll probably get a cease and desist or some sort of, we'll be suing you for using or appropriating and she just said, really, love what you're doing and really great that you're keeping my husband's spirit of his music alive. And I was like, oh, wow.
Lovely.
So that's really nice.
Yeah. Amazing.
But yeah, I mean, we all have these players that kind of reach out to us, as we go along. I mean, I did have a Mark King phase, and I had, all the usuals: Abe Laboriel, Anthony Jackson, Marcus Miller. I mean, a lot of my sort of phrasing comes out of Marcus Miller, although a lot of it I play completely incorrectly. Now I can see what he's doing. And again, I find that's another thing where, talking to drummers about it, they've all got their sort of gad things that they do where the sticking's a bit wrong, but then it sounds like them rather than somebody else. And I think sometimes the internet's great, but also it takes all the mystery out of things as well in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Learning something slightly wrong is still a very valid way of getting better and getting your shit together, isn't it? Like, I think that really works. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely done that with Marcus over the years.
Yeah, well, that thing that he does where he goes, or that really fast. I do a hammer on with this hand.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Which is wrong.
Yeah.
But it works, and I can play it in time. I mean, that's sort of one of the things as well about learning music and listening to stuff. I try and anything I hear like a phrase over a chord, and I think, oh, that's a nice idea, and then or a section over a 2-5-1 or something, and I'll learn it in different keys and work it out so that I've, got some interesting things to play. And that's always like a nice sort of challenge. You listen to a solo and go, that's really nice, like that. And, I like those solos also that tell a story rather than are a sort of sequence of licks. There was a time when all the sax players, it was like, well, that'll be the Mike Brecker lick from that. Oh, that's from that album, and that's from that one. And it was almost like the Steve Gadd thing is with drummers. It was almost like a competition of who could cram as many licks from their favourite player, which is great. People are studying, and it's amazing. But I think if you can step away, back from that a bit, and get your own little thing going, as it were. But yeah, it always fascinates me. There's a 7 flat 9 chord, or an altered thing that somebody puts over a 7 chord with a raised 5 or whatever. Really interesting. My ear always gets taken by those nice sort of things that add to the sort of the harmony and stuff like that. So that's always a sort of fascination. I ended up on a gig, and it was like the guy had subbed it to me because he didn't play any jazz, and it was with the London Schools Choir and the Bark Choir, which was incredible. The Bark Choir are amazing. The school, there's 130 of them or something in Cadogan Hall, and there was a little jazz thing, and it was a Sam Jones tune called Visitation. Great tune. Bob Berg plays an amazing solo, and he counted it off. It was so fast, and I had to play a solo, and I just about got through it. It was really, really up. So, and it was a unison little head. So once I got it home, I was like, I must listen to this. And then Bob Berg solo, I'm still working on it. This is 3 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are little things. There's so much good stuff in the solo that you really look at. And obviously he was a master tenor player and brilliant soloist. So that's fun. And also just grooves, any sort of dirty grooves I hear, particularly sort of, things, people like Nate Phillips I really dig. Do you know that guy from Pleasure?
Yeah.
He's a fantastic player. And just, always listening to new stuff and always just trying to, try and make me Overwater sound good, really. But
that's a nice link. That may tie into the question we tend to finish these with, which would be, what advice would you give your younger self now, knowing what you know now? How could you help that guy out in terms of progressing through the ranks musically and also professionally? Like, there's obviously, I know it felt like it took me quite a long time to kind of really find a foothold in London and start getting gigs I really wanted to tell my mum about. What advice would you give that guy and help him out?
What would that's a hard one. Probably to be it's weird. We've all got our own personality and stuff, and I'm not very sort of pushy, and it's difficult to feel out how sort of pushy you can be.
Yeah.
But, sort of representing yourself or pushing yourself forward is it's not something I'm comfortable doing at all. So maybe I'd have got myself into different places. But I think probably just to be a bit more, and this probably goes for me now as well, be a bit more satisfied with what you're doing, in a way. But I'd say that might go for lots of us, but I guess. But it's a long path as well. When you're young, that's one of the advantages, I think, when you're young, is you have absolutely no fear. You just play. And now, where I am, I'm a grandfather recently and stuff like that. And it's like suddenly, there's a realization of a different, whole different aspect of, certainly a lack of confidence that I have now that I never used to have. So there's those sort of things as well. I think, one of the things I think when you're young is just enjoy the moment and, roll with it and also take every chance you get, Sometimes people turn things down, that you're offered for sort of odd reasons. And it's very difficult to make all the right choices all the time as well.
Yeah.
You might get offered a tour and then it's like, I should have done that. And there's a lot of opportunities. I think to turn that on its head slightly now, when I get offered something with new people, I always take work with new people than I will with the same people that I've always been working with, even if it's not as much money, because it's good to, you know, move around a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah. Can keep expanding that circle of contacts and friends. And...
Yeah. So that's a good thing when you're younger. It's like, you know, eke out, you know, and I think I could have been, things might have been slightly different, but you know, I do know some of the younger bass players, and they're you know, some of them are extremely pushy, or they're very interactive, or they're, you know, and maybe the younger me, you know, that might have been something where, I don't know, the possibilities might have been different, but you know, I it would be hard for me to wish sort of anything that's, you know, where I've got to. You know, I'm happy, you know, I have limited happiness where I am, but you know, you put a lot of hard work. I mean, that's the other thing as well, is nothing happens by accident. If you put hard work into things, you know, I did an hour on upright this morning. It's not my first instrument. I only started playing when I was 32 or so. But it's, you know, you need to sort of keep the ball rolling, and then I'll probably play some fretless this afternoon or something. So, you know, there's lots of, because that doesn't come out very often, and you don't want to go out on it and be like, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there's things you can, you know, just trying to keep the ball rolling. Bit of sight. I did a lot of sight reading the last few weeks because I had some film sessions last week, so did like 4 days on a film, which all ended up. I took my Overwater. I played 2 long notes on them. two tied semi-breves across 2 bars, or 4 bars. It's 4 bars worth of Overwater, and the rest of it was on upright. So you never know what's.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, that kind of pays into what you're saying. You don't know what you're going to get sometimes, so you want to stay sharp. Funny enough, after this call, I also have to go and do my upright homework because I've got some stuff coming up, and it is one of those instruments that if you don't continuously put a bit of time into it, you'll get a call one day and you'll get caught out. Because if I've not been practicing upright regularly, I'll have blisters within half an hour, and it's just very hard to play and tune. It doesn't reward you at all if you've not been putting the hours in, does it?
No, I mean, I did the disco prom the other day, and there's 4 double bass players, and I was right next to them, and you know, so much work in every little bow movement that they make, and all of that, and I'm just absolutely in awe of these people. You know, I look at that. I've done hours on the bow in the past few years, but it's like it's never going to make up for 40 years.
It's hard, isn't it? Yeah. It's a very, very different animal once you pull the bow out.
Yep. And also, you know, intonation all over it. You've got to know your instrument well. Yeah. But yeah, interesting thing. But yeah, great.
One of the kind of regular themes with that question, with everyone from Trevor Barry to Sandy Beals to Ian, and, you know, I think most people have had that common theme of say yes to as much as possible, particularly when you're getting started. But I think that kind of continues, really. Like they're all learning opportunities, they're all learning experiences, and a chance to, you never know who you're going to meet on a gig.
Absolutely. Yeah. And often there's somebody there, you know, or you get a gripper at the end who wants to tell you about my favourite one of all time was, I was up Newcastle or something. Yeah. And the guy came up, he was like chatting away. He goes, "Oh, I've got a friend who lives in London. His name's John. He's got a red bass. Do you know him?"
Sure.
Got
a gripper. I've not heard this expression before. A gripper.
Gripper. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the ones that come up after the gig.
Yeah.
And you're trying to call the cables up, and they
want to talk about pedals and
they
strings.
want to talk about I had one of those. Didn't sound very good. Or have you tried this? Or and you just want to pack the car and go home.
Yeah,
you love it.
Phil, thank you so much for your time today, man.
Dan,
we really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Excellent.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get you some strings in the post, mate. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. I'm excited to try them next week. So
Yeah, great. I look forward to that.
cool.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much
mate.
for having me.
Thanks for your time. I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye bye.